congregate in the southern southwest part of Minot. One person would head a mile south. Now you know out in the Midwest how the cross sections work. There's a road every mile north and every mile east and west. So the first car would go out a mile and say, okay, I'm out a mile, and then he would start going a mile west. And the second car would start going his mile to the south. Get to that 1 mile point, report back, and so they would end up with a string of vehicles headed right towards this hook-shaped echo. And they say, yeah, I'm starting to get hail. The storm is coming, and here's where I'm located. So the National Weather Service can start tracking it and tell the local officials, emergency management, police department, whatever, go ahead and push the button. That's kind of what happens here, except we have so many ham radio operators, they say, no, don't go out and drive into the thunderstorm. Just stay where you are and report what you see. There's enough of us that blanket that. Another thing I want to mention has to do with what we call repeaters. Now, to simplify this, instead of calling out a certain frequency, I'm just going to give it a color. Say, okay, everybody meet on the blue frequency, and we'll coordinate, what we see. Well, that's fine if I'm here and I'm talking to Rick. But if I want to talk to Roger out there, he's too far away for me to talk with a simple low-powered rig, and his VHF is pretty much in line of sight. So what we'll do is over there on top of the rotary banner, we'll put what is called a repeater. Okay, and we push a little magic button that says offset on it, and what that means, okay, we're listening on the blue frequency, but when we transmit, we're transmitting on the red frequency. In the meantime, that repeater that's up there is listening on the red frequency and transmitting on the blue frequency. See what I mean? All of you out there, you're listening on the blue frequency, but you're transmitting on the red frequency. In the meantime, that repeater up there is listening on the red frequency and transmitting on the blue frequency. Another difference between that radio that's up there on top of the banner, you don't have to push to talk. As soon as the signal is coming in, it trips a relay, and simultaneously, while listening on the red frequency, it is simultaneously transmitting on the blue frequency. This is the same principle that all repeaters use. East Alton Police, State Police, taxi cab companies, all that stuff. That's the essence of a repeater. So through that repeater, I can talk to Roger. Now, in this memo that I put out, those of you that have scanners may want to plug those frequencies in there. That primary frequency, the 145.230, that's our blue frequency for Madison County. And if you want up-to-date, real-time information, you're getting it even before the decision makers say push the button. There's another thing about these repeaters, and one thing that makes ham radio so interesting. I'm going to miss a meeting here in a few weeks because I have to go suffer through an airport managers conference in Dallas, Texas. I can look up the repeater frequencies in Dallas, Texas, dial them into my radio, either the mobile or the handheld, and I'm one of the gang in Dallas. Just that simple. We have a standardization and interoperability system that nobody else in the world has. I'm going to quit rambling on now and open it up to questions. Your questions are always more interesting than my rambling on.
Where's the FM radio located on the giant?
Thank you. You're right. I forgot that one. The FM radio. What was in front of your nose?
The 2 meters?
That was 2 meters. Okay. Then the FM broadcast band is just below that. Just below that. 2 meters around 144 megahertz, and of course the FM band is around 100 megahertz. Yeah. Good catch. I was going to point that out because it's a good reference. People know where the AM band is and the FM band is and where CD radio is. Just trying to flush in the rest of it. Good question. Who else? Yes, sir.
Your equipment doesn't look any different than what I use with the fire service, but yet we constantly couldn't transmit with the fire service equipment. Is that because of where it's located on the band, or why why it seems like the ham radio always works better.
Thank
when
you.
we have
That's
fire service.
in fact, one of our slogans is "When all else fails, ham radio." Part of the reason is, oh boy, how do I say this without violating the four-way test? Part of the reason is a lot of these services have made things far more complex than what it needs to be. And some of it is so they can have a proprietary interest. For example, the so-called Starcom 21 system, which a lot of I think almost all fire services do carry a Starcom 21 system somewhere in their suite of radios. Part of the problem is that all of that is plugged in by remote control by Motorola in some laboratory up in Chicago. And if they decide not to come to work that day, or all of a sudden you have a requirement that doesn't meet their format, it takes about 6 weeks for them to change the format. Actually, it takes them about 20 minutes to change the format, but the rest of the time to get the invoice through. So that is part of the reason it just becomes more complex than it needs to be. I'm also guessing, and maybe Roger and others can attest to this, that a lot of times when you're talking with your own trucks within your unit, that's not that big of a problem, but now you've got Alto showing up and Granite City showing up, and now you have this huge interoperability problem that hams don't have. That's one. I would be interested in finding out more details about it. Maybe we can troubleshoot it and come up with something simple. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You know, when you watch the weathercasters on TV, and they'll say, we're getting reports from our ground observers or
Trained spotters, that's
Yeah,
another
is that-
thing that they use. Yes, out of their entire trained spotter corps, I would say 80% of them are ham radio operators. Now, every spring, and I'll make sure, I mean, it's too late this year, but next spring I'll make sure the word gets out. The National Weather Service provides training at no cost to you. It's about a 3.5, 4-hour block, usually on a Saturday morning, usually at Lewis and Clark College, where anybody who wants to learn about severe weather and how to report it can get this training. National Weather Service would like to have us go for no more than 2 years without, I've had this training for 25 years, but they'd like us to get at least a refresher, those of us that are veterans of this, at least get a refresher every 2 years. But there are other ways to report the weather in. They've got a discrete website, and they have discrete phone numbers, where you've had the training, you have the spotter ID number, and you look out, your storefront down there, and hail is golf ball size. Somebody needs to know that. The other thing, they just recently, they really, really, really want to know roads that are flooded over. So that's another place, because we're out looking at this stuff. When something hits, I go to the airport. A couple of reasons. One is I can see what's going on, just a nice 360-degree view. And I have access to certified, calibrated weather instruments, so I don't have to guess. Is the wind 30 knots gusting to 70? I've got real information that I can get back into the system. Yeah, good question. Yes, sir.
Who supports the repeaters?
The repeaters. Okay, all of the support by FCC regulation, ham radio operators must operate on what they call a non-pecuniary interest. We cannot accept, it cannot and will not, it would just be disgraceful for us to accept any money for any of our services. It's all provided at no cost to private sector or public sector, either one. The repeaters start springing up with things like that one handout, the Lewis and Clark Radio Club. They own about 3 repeaters as a club. We paid for it either out of our club dues. Sometimes Motorola, they've worn out the repeater for the East Alton Police Department. Here, hams, if you want to have it and fix it, and then we cross-can parts and stuff like that and get it to work. We also very much appreciated donated space. One of the local radio stations, I'm embarrassed I can't remember which one, had